Thank you so much to be here today. I know it's a long day, so let's start it. We are very happy to be here and share with you what we have as AWS regarding hybrid services. You can benefit from our hybrid services, and you will see how you can take this advantage. We also have a Netflix case to share with you in how Netflix decreased the cost by using our hybrid solutions. This session, it will have three parts. The first part, we will have an overview of the secure hybrid edge services. The second part, we will be doing deep dive on AWS Outposts, and then we will open to any questions that you may have. We have a booth in the expo hall, so if any one of you wants to make more questions, or if you want to share your specific cases, encouraged to visit us at the booth, all right? So we are seeing an evolution on the application migration to the cloud. And this process starts with the AWS regions. Most of the applications are moved to the regions. More than 90% of the applications are very easily, can be migrated easily to the cloud. But we are seeing that you are receiving new requirements, like, for example, data residency. So you have two options here. You can choose use a region if the region is available at your country, or you can use a hybrid service to deploy your information and comply with government regulations or internal decisions that you already make in this area. Then you have another area to cover, which is the local data processing, or if you need low latency for your applications. So you can deploy AWS services on your data center in order to comply with the on-premises needs. AWS, thinking on all of these challenges, can offer you regions that most of you know already, and we have three different services: AWS Outposts, local zone, and wavelength, to help you to solve this kind of needs. These three services needs to be connected to a region to work, and we will go to that options later on, more in depth. If you don't want to have a connection to a region, you have the Snow family devices. This group of devices can offer you compute and storage, also artificial intelligence options to process data on the edge, right? For example, in a Navy ship, or in a truck, or an ambulance, for example. So you can reduce the cost, because you can do the processing on the edge and just transmit the meaningful set of data towards the region. Let's go a little bit in other hybrid use cases that you can benefit. You can also use the hybrid infrastructure to provide disaster recovery options for your companies, and also you can benefit to use VMware running on Outpost solutions. So when you have the challenge to integrate a lot of VMware environments, Outposts could be a very good solution to use. We are tightly integrated with the VMware offering, and also you can use an Outpost on-premise device to have disaster recovery on it, because you can make the disaster recovery architecture from the region to the outpost, or from the outpost to the region. Basically, a local zone is a service managed infrastructure by AWS that provide very low latency at metro areas, and you can also comply with data residency requirements. So from the technical point of view, you will access your console and you will see, you will use the same console, but you can deploy the data and some services locally in a specific city. If the low latency is not enough, you can move to Outpost to have low latency for your applications, and we are also seeing the case where you have a data center investment already, and you need to get the most of it. You can access to AWS Outposts, and you can start using this data center infrastructure to deploy the same AWS services that you already know, all right? So the next one is Waveland. Waveland is a compute and storage solution that we can deliver on telco companies to provide very low latency for 5G mobile user applications. As an example, you can have gambling, gaming, betting, or any applications that you want to run in a very fast mode, like stock trading. You can do it with Waveland. You don't have to learn anything more. It's the same console, the same secure environment, the same infrastructure. So it's very easy for you to use these products and in very fast pace. And that products would also help you to increase your innovation pace. How? Because since you have this equipment on your premise, you can move a lot of your data inside of the devices at zero cost, because you will be using your network backbone to move the information towards these kind of devices, right? You only will pay for the transfer from these devices to the region. There are three main IT initiatives that we encourage you to have in mind: migration and modernization, disaster recovery, and test and development environment. All of these three options can be executed by the VMware use. We have a product that is called VMware on Outpost. So using VMware here, you can really accelerate and reduce the overall cost of your migration to the cloud. We have more information, as you can see below. Everything is on our webpage, and we can deep dive on your specific cases, as I mentioned, at the booth. The Outpost family has three products: the Outpost Rack and two Outpost server. One of the Outpost servers have the Graviton processor, so you can have a really great performance by the use of this processor. We have these devices at the expo hall if you want to take a look how they are and how they could benefit you. The Outpost Rack mainly are they are mainly designed to be used on retail stores and on healthcare providers and factory and distribution centers. So in the healthcare area, you can use all the imaging that is produced by the medical equipment and do the whole processing there, storage, and use artificial intelligence, use application on EC2, everything on the edge, reducing the amount of data that you need to move to the cloud. Outpost Rack is available in 65 countries. We started with around 52 countries in 2020, and we decided to increase the coverage to help you out to have your data when you need to be this data be. So pretty much that is what we have now if you want to order an Outpost Rack. Pricing. The pricing, you can see all the pricing in our webpage is public as any of our services, but the most important thing here is you can configure an EC2 capacity and a storage capacity for a 3-year period. You can pay monthly, partially upfront, or fully upfront, right? And on top of this, you will be having a usage, right, for the services that you will consume on top of the solution. You can make upgrades over time, and if you want. We have a lot of AWS consulting partners that could help you in this journey to migrate your applications to our hybrid solutions. And you can see very known partners here that could help you, and encourage to reach them. On local zones, I just want to share with you that we have a reduced or a set of services on a local zone. We don't have the 200 plus services. We have like 12 services, but to run locally. But from the console perspective, you will have access to the 200, and you can choose which services can be running on the local zone solution. These are the local zones that we have. On Canada, Vancouver and Toronto is the ones that we have in our roadmap. And we will continue to announce more local zones because we see a lot of need to this. And we encourage you, every one of you, if you think that you need another city, you can go to our webpage and require to be that city considered for our teams. Right? There is a web page, and you can let us know. The local zone use cases are mostly related to latency-based solutions and location-based solutions. In the latency-based solution, the most common cases are gaming, social media, telecommunications. On location-based, we have financial services, public sector, and it's very important to see this like an option for two-step migrations. You can migrate to an Outpost solution or a rack or server solution, and then you can move to a region, or have a mixed architecture, some of the information and services running on the region, another in a local zone, and others in the Outpost, which is the best for you. Also, all the modernizations and innovation initiatives could be speed up by using hybrid solutions. Netflix had these very powerful workstations. So most of the people in Netflix have to go to the office to work on these workstations. What Netflix did was deployed everything that they have on compute and storage on a local zone, which is located in Los Angeles. So all the employees can work right now using remote desktops connecting to with very low latency to this local zone, and that really increased the productivity of Netflix a lot. So this is a very good case to share with you. Finally, we have the Snowball devices. Also encouraged to visit us at the booth. You can see there the two different models that we have. We have the Snowball Edge model and the Snowcom model. The Snowball Edge, you can find this equipment on 80 terabytes storage optimized version, and you also have the 42 terabytes computed optimized version. These are equipments that you can take anywhere you want. You can run EC2 there. You can run S3. You can run ECS, EKS. A lot of things you can do locally. It's not and it's important to remember this, it's not a storage device. You can use it for storage. You can connect to your data, move a lot of data, and send it back to us, and we can move very quickly to the cloud. But the important thing in the Snowball family is that you can do compute, artificial intelligence, and a lot of more things at the edge, right? We have two demos at the booth. One of the demos is using the snow. You can see an applications using a Snowball that could recognize objects. You put like a cup, a laptop, a TV, and the system immediately recognizes the object. You can see the demo running. And we have also a prototype when we use drones, put a camera with a system on it, and in case that you have a national disaster, you can release all those drones. They can spot the people on the area and get back with the right information to the first responders to go exactly where the people are and do not wait very valuable time for rescue the people. And those are use cases, and they are our reality right now. And finally, we have some customer use cases. We want to focus on the healthcare IoT and the industrial IoT options. So you can have a lot of information getting produced by these IoT sensors in a hospital, for example. You can collect all that information in the Snow device and do this processing on the edge. Also, you can get a lot of data in manufacturing processes, and again, consolidate all that information, processing on the edge, and only transmit to the cloud a very few amount of information. So you will be providing decision-making information, and also reducing the cost because you will not send you will be not sending the whole raw data towards the cloud. Finally, we want to share with you this case, which is a data migration at a scale with the Snowball Edge. In this case, we move 10 petabytes of the information. Photobox is maybe some of you know this company, others don't. But Photobox, you can upload pictures and they create albums for you. But they want to move to the cloud to increase their pace of innovation and also use artificial intelligence, but the amount of data was very, very high. So they use a Snowball Edge to accomplish their objectives. All right? Thank you so much for your attention. Hand it over to Tarek, that will be doing a deep dive on Outpost.
Thank you, sir. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tarek. I'm a solution architect on the AWS team based in Montreal. I'm on the worldwide public sector team, and I work with public sector customers in Canada and the United States. So this might be the first time you kind of hear about Outpost, and I'll run you through it high level. Think of Outpost as really a logical construct used to pool the capacity from one or more racks. Outpost is a managed service, so it brings the AWS infrastructure, the services, and most importantly, the operational model of AWS to customer premises. In the image, you can see, we have got a region with 2 availability zones, and those availability zones connected to an outpost that would be in your premise. If you want to think about it in a simple way, imagine a rack inside our availability zone, inside our data centers that we kind of take out and bring into your on-premise data center. We connect it with a very long cable through VPN tunnel that we call Service Link, and that allows you to consume the AWS services in your on-premise data center. If you're curious about the configurations and kind of what's available and you have access to the AWS console, you can actually go into the AWS Outpost piece and see what's available. The pricing is public. There are predefined SKUs and part numbers for what you can order, which is what covers the majority of use cases that we see at AWS, but we do make custom ones for customers as well. So because it comes from the region, it comes with some of the services that come from the region, and this is something that technical decision makers need to keep in mind. So we cover the pretty big core basic services. So for storage, you've got EBS for block storage, S3 for object, and you can also do RDS backup and EBS local snapshots directly on S3. For compute, we've got EC2 and the application load balancer. For databases, we've got RDS and Elasticache, but for RDS, we support SQL Server and Postgres, so there are some database engines that customers are not able to run yet on Outpost. For those of you who like to run containers, we support EKS and ECS. Amazon EMR for some of the big data workloads. And lastly, we have the Cloud Endure offering, which offers basically migration and cloud and disaster recovery. And last but not least, I know Edgar mentioned it, VMware Cloud. So you can actually, there's an offering to run VMware Cloud in the AWS region. You can also run VMware Cloud on AWS Outposts in your on-premise data center. And how did we kind of get here from Outposts, or what was kind of the use case? As Edgar mentioned, there are 3 use cases for Outpost. One is you want lower latency, 2, local data residency, or you want to do local data processing. And you could pick one or all 3, but that's the typical scenario. And I have a gaming example because this is one of our global gaming customers. And the example here is really, you got some workloads in a region, it's running some DynamoDB, maybe some game runtimes with some Lambda, and everything goes through an internet gateway. And the example in Canada is great because if you're in Quebec, like me in Montreal, Can Central is very close geographically, so that's a low link, that's a low latency, and I have a great experience. But if you're in Vancouver, you basically have to travel across all of Canada to get to that server. So with Outpost, we kind of have the same scenario. It's still the same data in the region and the same services. You see in the middle, there's a link. It's called the service link to the region. It can either be public or it could be something that you can run through a direct connection. And the new box is your on-premise data center. And that on-premise data center, what it's going to give you is that your users now don't necessarily have to all go through the internet gateway that is in region. They go through a new logical construct, which is called, it's the LGW here. It's basically the local gateway that connects to connects to your local on-prem infrastructure. So the goal in this scenario is that you get lower latency and you get to do local data processing for that particular user with Outpost. What's it look like kind of physically? As Edgar mentioned, we have the full rack in the booth, so please come and see us. Basically, it's an industry standard 42U rack. It's fully assembled and ready to be rolled into final position. AWS technicians will come and install it. We do a site survey to make sure that you have the right connectivity and you have the right clearances and you have the right power and cooling, et cetera. And the key for you as a customer is really you simply plug it in to power and network, and it's ready to be consumed. It is managed service, so we manage all the patching of the hardware and the underlying software stack. And you would continue to consume it as you consume things in regions. So if you've got Windows on top of EC2, we take care of the EC2 portion, and you as a customer need to make sure that you continue to patch and update your Windows. It has centralized redundant power conversion unit. So if you come to the booth, you'll see it. Basically, it allows us for really easy serviceability. It's more reliable, and it's better energy efficiency. And it's what we run in the regions. So that's why we decided to put it on Outpost. And lastly, I'll speak about this in a little bit more detail later, but it comes with redundant active components, including the top rack switches. Now, because this is physical hardware, our model changes for the shared responsibility. So some of you guys and girls may be familiar with this. Basically, the shared responsibility model is AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. So all the underlying infrastructure, really, the hardware, the software, et cetera, AWS is responsible for. And the customer typically is responsible for the security in the cloud. So you need to turn on encryption as a customer. You need to patch your operating systems. You need to make sure that you have proper security policies and firewall rules, et cetera. Where things change is really this box, the orange rectangle. Because this is now physically in your data center as a customer, you are now responsible for physical security and access control. You're responsible for the regional connectivity because we need to connect to the region of your choice. We need to make sure that that link is up and continues to stay up. Environmental controls. So you as a customer have to have a data center with enough space, power, cooling, heat dissipation, and your floor tiles need to be able to support the weight of the rack. And lastly, and this is maybe something customers don't typically think about with AWS, is you are now responsible for capacity management. Because in region, you don't think about capacity very much. You need a whole bunch of S3 or a whole bunch of EPS, and it's kind of there by default. With Outpost, working with people like myself on my team, need to really think about capacity management because we can add capacity to you, but we still need to kind of build those hosts, bring them on site, and install them and provision them. So you need to make sure you have enough capacity for your needs. And since we're talking about physical security, security on the Outpost is, from an at-rest perspective, it's EBS and S3 is secure by default or encrypted by default. Data in transit, so any data that goes from the Outpost to the region is also encrypted by default. And when you delete data, it's the same thing as in region. If you delete an instance, the instance goes away, the EBS volume is all zeroed out, and even the memory allocation for that instance is completely gone as well. It's all zeroed before another application can come in and be deployed. You can come see this at the booth. All the data is encrypted at rest in Nitro, and Nitro is our hypervisor. The key material, so all the cryptographic information, is actually based on a chip that kind of looks like this. I think you guys can see it. And basically, you can destroy the key with 3 turns, and that makes the data completely unusable. So hence, physical security in your data center, very important. And if we do come in to replace the droplet, which is our term for a host, we'll make sure the keys are destroyed so that data leaving your data center is completely useless. I spoke about capacity planning, and it's something that's critical, something you need to start thinking about in more kind of an on-premise mindset. You really need to plan for all of your workloads. Because you don't have necessarily a lot of extra hardware lying around in the rack, you typically need to plan for peak. You can't plan for regular usage now and then easily scale up like you do in the region. You need to plan for growth. So if you think your storage needs are going to grow within 2 to 3 or 4 months, or depending on your timeline, it's probably better to have that hardware provisioned beforehand, as opposed to requiring storage and not having unavailable data or storage in S3. You need to plan for server failures, which I'll talk about, but you also need to plan for server failure for each family. So in the example here, we have got some C5s, some M5s, some R5s. And if you want to plan for failure based on these types of hosts, you need to plan for a failure for every instance family. So if you have an application that runs on 2 C5s that cannot tolerate cannot tolerate a host failure, then you should have 3 C5 servers, one being there just in case of a failure. And lastly, you need to monitor utilization. Thankfully, we make that easy for you because it's still the same CloudWatch events and metrics that you already know in region. And you can also, in your planning, decide to do things like spread placement to make sure that you mitigate for a single rack failure. On the storage side, similar to the compute side, so there's EBS and S3. There's a lot of ways of divvying them up, and we can help you decide what's best for you. But EBS are basically in tiers of 11, 33, and 55 terabytes. And S3 starts at, there's 20, 26, 48, 96, and 240. And of course, for your capacity, for example, for S3, you should consider everything. Think about your local snapshots with S3. Capacity can be increased if you like, but it's best to plan for the capacity that you need plus a certain amount of growth, so it makes it easier for you to consume the service. I'll spend the last part of the discussion really talking about what could possibly go wrong, right? A disaster planning. So I'll start with a quote from Werner Vogels, who's the CTO of Amazon. Basically says, failures are given, and everything will eventually fail over time. So as a customer, you need to start thinking through this design process, what am I going to plan for, and what can I tolerate? I'll run you through what the most common use cases are. The first thing is, I have a network failure, so my outpost is no longer connected to the region. You need to mitigate that. Mitigate that by having redundant routers or switches on your side with redundant links, or maybe a direct connect with a backup link that's a VPN, et cetera. But make sure that's something that customers need to plan for. The second piece is an instant failure. Hopefully, a lot of you are already using some of our services in region, and you've built or architected an application to tolerate instance failures, right? So you can mitigate that with something as simple as auto-scaling groups. The next type of failure is a little harder to plan and mitigate for. It's a full server failure. So as I mentioned earlier, if you've got a C5 host that just failed, you can't take those C5 instances and run them on an R5 host. So you need to plan. You need something to consider, because that's always something you're going to discuss with people like myself on my team, solution architects. You need to plan to have extra capacity for this type of failure based on your workload and what your requirements are. The next piece is a full data center failure. So think about an earthquake, a really bad natural disaster. Then the way to mitigate that is to have multiple outposts in multiple physical data centers. And the last piece is, in the unlikely event that the whole availability zone or region fails, the way you would mitigate for that is when you actually order an outpost, You get to select the region in the availability zone that it will get connected to or anchored to. So one way to do that is to have multiple availability zones, multiple outposts, and multiple separate data centers anchored to separate regions or separate availability zones. So those are the things you need to keep in consideration. We're going to go questions in about 6 minutes, so this will be good. I mentioned built-in resilience earlier. So the outpost networking device, which is the top of rack switch, they're redundant, the power is redundant, and the fiber patch panel is redundant. So those pieces, those components are redundant. You as a customer need to tell us what your expectations are for the redundancy and availability for your application stack, and then we will make a recommendation about the storage and compute hosts that you would require. Data center availability or AZ resiliency. I mentioned this a little earlier, but basically, this is an illustration of what it would look like if you would have multiple physical data centers that connect or anchor to multiple different availability zones. And as a customer, you need to start thinking about, well, how am I going to replicate, distribute, or back up my S3 that's on an outpost, my EBS volumes, and all my instances? How do I back those up? So if you've got a use case where data residency is the key, which is a lot of our public sector customers, you can't necessarily back up to region because you, by policy or by compliance, that data cannot be in region. So we support multiple offerings where you can actually replicate or back up from the outpost to the region, from outpost to outpost, and from region to outpost. If I dig deeper on the available solutions, you've got Cloud Endure, right, which allows you to do disaster recovery planning and backup. You can even do near real-time block level replication for your EBS volumes. Cloud Endure supports on-prem to outpost, outpost to outposts, outpost to region, and vice versa. The second piece is data sync. So if you guys aren't familiar with data sync, basically data sync was going to allow you to move data through various AWS storage services. And you can use something like data sync to move data from S3 on Outpost 1 to S3 on Outpost 2, for example. And lastly, if you already have a backup solution or a DR solution that you're already using, you're familiar with, you've operationalized, you've tested and hardened, I encourage you to look at the AWS Marketplace and see if that third party is actually validated and tested for Outpost. And if so, you could just continue to use it with Outpost. Lastly, to finish off, we encourage you to get engaged in the training and certification content that we have. The QR codes are here for you. They're available. They're available in 16 plus languages, and there are 12 certifications that you can look at. With that, we'll go to questions. Edgar, if you want to join me. We have about 10 minutes. I think the first gentleman was here.
So it's a couple of questions, actually. So first one is when the network failure happened between the outpost and the data center, or between and the AWS, any endpoint that's only using services from the outpost, are they going to be affected, or they can still work until the network is restored?
So it can support a network failure for a very limited amount of time. The way the outpost is designed is that it is built to be a connected service. So if you lose connectivity for a few minutes or an hour, then that's okay. But once you lose connectivity, the control plane is in the region. So you will not be able to access S3 objects. You will not be able to start or stop an instance. If you've got EC2 instances that need to have IAM roles, IAM comes from the control plane in the region. It doesn't run on the outpost. So hence the big importance on having redundant network links with proper routing design.
Okay.
Question 2?
Yeah. Do you have a benchmark on cost saving of using Outpost versus the equivalent AWS services?
That's something that's more detailed. I don't know, Edgar, if you want to take that.
We have some TCO tools to, make a simulation, but there is a lot of variables in that one. But we do have some to offer you about. If you want to go to the booth, we can show you how.
Yeah, we can look at it in detail if you'd like.
Sure.
It is something that is available.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hey, thanks. I got a quick question. So based on the previous answer that you gave, and that it can sustain like for 1 hour. But according to my understanding, let's say if it is a connected service from on-prem through the AWS region, right?
Yeah.
So let's say my links are cut down. And if I'm trying to access an S3 object from the Outpost, the API will go to the AWS region and come all the way down to the Outpost, right?
Yeah, the control plane
Yeah.
is completely in the region. So
Yes.
if you lose connectivity, you will not have access to your objects.
And like the data plane?
Yeah, you still need, the data plane lives in the Outpost, but if you lose connectivity, you have no access to your objects.
Absolutely. So that's why I was asking, like, why did you say that if it is like the data, like the link is disconnected for 1 hour or something like that?
No. So it's a very nuanced answer. If you'd like, we can talk about it in detail. The real answer is it depends greatly about how you set up your application and whether it needs roles, et cetera. So that's something we can discuss, but it's very, very dependent on the application stack that the customers decide to run.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, regarding the data sync, when you move your data for the first time for petadata, is there a time to make the delta calculation? So you move the migration context first, your peta data. You have a lot of data to move into the storage. Then after this data has been moved, it took, I don't know, weeks, hours. You still have a delta to sync to complete the migration. How does the time for calculation of this delta take?
So are you talking specifically about having on-premise data, and with that on-premise data, moving it over to the Outpost?
Yeah.
Yeah. So data sync can do that for you. Okay. So if you ever use the service data sync, it will actually synchronize and will actually look at the data and see what's been replicated and what's not, and it'll check and move them over.
Okay, so no need then to just think about the time it takes for calculating the delta. We just let data sync take care of everything, and we just... Okay.
I mean, we need to look at the use case in detail for you, but data sync is designed for that, to move data between multiple storage services on the AWS side.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, so my understanding is the Outpost, you mentioned there's only about 12 services available. So my question was like, if we have some kind of requirements, can this service be customized?
So I can take that. So yeah, Outpost, I think Edgar mentioned 12 for local zones, but it's similar for Outpost. And we've covered the vast majority of use cases for our customers. Now, if you as a customer have a requirement for a very particular service, please reach out to your AWS team, or you can come see us at the Secure Hybrid Edge booth, and we can have a discussion about it, and we can tell you whether it's something our team is considering, or if it's something that would eventually come. But the main premise on our side is we take customer feedback, and that goes to the service team and engineering, and we prioritize based on that. So if there's something that's very important to you that isn't in local zones or isn't in Outposts, please let us know, because that's the kind of information we need from you as customers, so we can kind of innovate and build on your behalf.
Correct. Yeah, it's very important that any need that you have to share with us, right? the booth will be a very good place to have those kind of talks.
We've got another 4 minutes if we have any other questions.
So if I have an outpost and I want to expand, for example, the compute part, what is usually the lead time to have that extra power?
So are you talking about making an expansion?
Yeah.
So that would depend on the type of expansion you're looking at. So whether you're expanding compute hosts and which compute hosts, storage hosts, which compute hosts. So it's highly dependent. That's something that you would need to discuss with your AWS team, and that hence our big emphasis on capacity planning, right? Okay. And if some of you are still consuming on-prem servers, you know that there are a lot of supply constraints for pretty much everything these days. So really important to look at that capacity planning at the time of when you understand what it is you need. We can look at it in more detail and give you a snapshot at the time when we talk and say, it might take 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but that would be only a snapshot in time based on when you had asked us. It can always kind of vary and change. So keep big emphasis on capacity management, capacity planning.
Yeah, we have when we get into the sizing part of the solution, we have like a percentage, 5%, 10, 15, percent of projected growth to you receive the rack with that capacity on it, right? Because if you ask for more capacity in 6 months, you have to go to your procurement. Every company have some, administrative task, and probably it's best for you to have already, a decent amount of growth already included in your approvals, original approvals. That is what we are seeing on our customers.
So just a quick question. On one of your slides, it shows the Outpost is on a lease function. Has Amazon changed his mind about that in the sense we can actually buy the Outpost outright?
No, Outpost is a service that you consume that is managed and based on a 1 or 3 year commit.
But the actual boxes that show up?
Pardon me?
Can we own the boxes that show up?
The actual rack is owned and operated by Amazon, consumed by the customer.
Would there be any time you change your mind on that?
Not that I know of, but if you'd like to come pass by the booth and tell us a little bit about your use case, or just right after the session, come say hello. We love to hear what your requirements are and see what contractual obligations are between our organizations to see what the option is. But the general answer is no. It is owned and operated by Amazon in a customer and consumed by the customer in their own data center.
Correct. I think it's important to give you the idea that AWS do not rent or sell any hardware, right? These solutions are tools that we provide you to be able to facilitate the process to consume the standard AWS services like EC2, EBS, right? So this kind of services can be compared with any hardware IT, solution. It's just a tool to provide our services, all right?
If I can add to that, I'm aware of multiple kind of Canadian public sector customers who contractually cannot consume that kind of service unless they actually procure the hardware, because it needs to be through a procurement vehicle. And we've been able, through our extended teams, help customers navigate that and get amendments and changes so that it can be consumed in the way it was intended. So happy to have a discussion about that.